My name is Danny Crisp, and I've helped almost 350 people get their Class A CDL. And every single one of them that used this system here passed that pre-trip on the very first try. That's right, 100% success rate. If it worked for them, it can work for you. Remember, when you apply to Prime, use my name and driver code in the drop-down, CRISDB. Now, stay tuned. Let's figure out how to ace that air brake test. Okay, very excited to be getting to this new modernized air brake test for the Critical 30 Class A CDL pre-trip inspection. Whew, that was a mouthful. Now, if you have been studying and you're seeing that there's a transition between the two tests, this is the new modernized test and what they will be using going forward, so you can count on this. This is also a universal style. I studied multiple states to make sure that this would work in a lot of different places, so this should cover you no matter where you're testing. Now, we know that the air brake test is the most critical part of your entire pre-trip because it is the only place that we can auto-fail. So we want to make sure that we get this thing exactly right. Now, there's a few different places we can get gummed up on this test, so we want to make sure that we're checking all our boxes, and this video is designed to help make sure you check all those boxes. Now, in this video, we will first be going over our 5 different pre-trip sections, as we can see here, followed by our 4-stage air brake test with an explanation of why we do these, so you have a better understanding of what we're actually performing. After that, we'll go out into the rig and we'll perform a perfect air brake test for you so that you can follow along with that. We'll be using the script that I provide, so if you're interested in a copy of that, reach out direct in the comments and I'll get that over to you. And after that example of an air brake test with a combination vehicle, we'll do a brief review to make sure we cover everything one last time before the video ends. So let's jump right into the 5 sections. So first things first, what are the 5 different sections of the modernized Class A CDL pre-trip exam? As we can see right here, we're going to have first our in-cab inspection, followed by our driver's side door and fuel area, followed then by our coupling, then our engine compartment. And that 5th and final section is going to be our lights section, as we can see right down here. Now, in the in-cab is where we will find our air brake test, and our air brake test has 4 different tests. That first test is going to be your governor cutoff test. That second test is going to be, as we can see here, the applied pressure test. Third test will be the warning light and buzzer test, and that 4th and final test is going to be the valve deployment test. So let's go through those tests one at a time. That first one we're going to see right here, that is our raise to governor cutoff test. And what we're doing here is displaying that we know how to build up the pressure in the air tanks to a certain point to make sure that governor cuts off and those tanks don't become overpressurized. We can't have our air supply tanks become overpressurized because that can become a problem for us. So we need to make sure that that governor cuts off and releases that air with the safety mechanism between 120 and 140 PSI. Now, it is important to remember that in these modernized trucks, that air compressor is helping to run multiple systems. In our 2024 Freightliner Cascadia, we can see that it is helping to run not only our braking, but also our power steering, our suspension, and that transmission. So those are 4 different systems that will malfunction to various degrees if we do not have a sufficient amount of air in those tanks. So there's another reason why that governor cutoff test is so important. Now, that second test is the applied pressure test, and this is really about making sure that we do not have any pinhole leaks in the lines or the tanks anywhere. We need to make sure and hold down our service brake, listening for leaks, and watching our gauges for 60 seconds to ensure that we do not drop 5 PSI, i.e. greater than 4 PSI, which means you can drop 4. Sometimes there's going to be a little bit of a settling that occurs, and that 4 PSI accounts for that, but it cannot drop 5 or greater. That is a sign that there's a bigger problem here. Now, we need to make sure we don't have any of those pinhole leaks in the lines of the tanks anywhere before we set out on our day from a shipper, from a receiver, from a truck stop, because it is a much easier problem to solve there. It is a problem that you do not want to have on a secondary or a tertiary highway out in Alabama where you're in hill country and there's no shoulder to pull off on. We want to keep that small problem small, right? We as operators love to keep small problems small. So when you are doing your applied pressure test, you're making sure that you are not having any line leaks or any tank leaks before you head out onto the road. Now our third test, as we can see right here, is going to be our warning light and buzzer test. And what we're doing here is we're pumping down on our service brake to drop that air pressure so that we can verify that at or before 55 psi, that warning light and buzzer comes on. And we need to verify it happens at this point because what happens between 20 and 45? Those valves deploy. And we need to make sure we have ample time of warning, 10 psi or greater, to get ourselves into a safe position. We need the truck to tell us, hey driver, you are losing significant amount of air and we need to pull off onto the side of the road before this problem becomes a much larger problem, right? So that warning light and buzzer needs to come on at or before 55 psi to ensure we have enough time to get off the road safely. Now that final test, as we can see right here, is the valve deployment test. And what we're doing here is continuing to pump down on that service brake to drop that air pressure to verify that between 45 and 20 psi, those valves deploy. We need to make sure that the truck will have the brakes lock up when we do not have sufficient air in the tanks so that we are not unsafe to ourselves or other vehicles out on the road, be them professional or personal vehicles. Right? We need to make sure we have sufficient air in the tanks for all those systems that it's running. And if we don't, we need the truck to be in a locked, safe position. So that way we can fix the problem and then get back out on the road. So that is a brief overview of our 4 different air brake tests. We can see how vital each one of them is. Again, that's that governor cutoff test, followed by that applied pressure test, followed by that warning light and buzzer test, and finally that valve deployment test. Now that we have a better understanding of what these look like, why don't we head out into the field, hop in the rig, go through one of these so you guys can see exactly what it looks like to get one of these things done correctly, both for your safety and to pass this CDL exam. Okay, now that we've got the wheel chock, let's cover a couple things before we get into this full air brake test. First thing is we want to make sure that we are complying with the standards of the state that we are testing in. Now, I have gone to great lengths to try and research as many states as I could to find the universal modernized test, and this should cover you no matter where you're testing, but you want to make 100% certain that it will, and make sure that you look at your state specifications for whether or not you are compliant with the requirements of the air brake test for your specific state. Now, most states want you to do the air brake test in a specific order. They want that governor cutoff test to be first. That way we're administering the final 3 tests with a full tank. So that's the way we're going to do that here. Again, different states require different things, so make sure that this is compliant with your state's specifications. Now, our air brake test has 4 stages. The first stage we're going to do here is our governor cutoff test. So first I need to do some things. Go ahead and put my code in, if I have one, and turn my truck to the on position. I need the truck to be on in order to fill the air tanks. Now I have my truck on. I'm going to then push my valves in, which is going to release a little bit of air. So now I can go ahead and begin my speech that's on that study guide. Again, if you have interest in that, reach out to me directly and I'll get it right over to you. My air brake test has 4 stages. First is the raise to governor cutoff test. I'm going to build my pressure up to the governor cutoff, which should kick on between 120 and 140 psi. Now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and rev my engine, as we can see here, at 13 RPMs, and get that air pressure built up. And now I am just simply listening for the moment that that air pressure is released with the governor cutoff. My governor cut off at 125 psi. It is now time to start the second stage of my air brake test, the applied pressure test. But before I do that, I need to again do a couple things to get ready for it. First, I need to go ahead and turn my engine off and my electric back on. I need to make sure I can read my gauges, but I can't have those tanks continue to fill up, or else I'm not going to see if there's a leak in them. Once I've done that, I also need to confirm that I have my hill assist back off. Remember, we need that hill assist off if your truck is equipped with that, because that cuts off the air supply to the trailer, and we are not able to see if there's a leak unless that hill assist has been turned off. So make sure you press that button, and you can tell it's off by the flashing icon on the dash. Now once I've done those things, I can go ahead and get into my applied pressure test. The second stage of my air brake test is my applied pressure test. I'm going to fully depress my service brake and wait for my gauges to stabilize. When they do, I'm going to make sure I do not lose more than 4 psi in 60 seconds while listening for leaks. Now at this point, I'm going to stand on my pedal, confirm that my gauges have stabilized, and say to that examiner, my gauges have now stabilized. Will you please start my clock for 60 seconds? Eventually that 60 seconds goes by. He says that's time. You take your foot off and you say to him, I did not lose more than 4 psi in 60 seconds and I did not hear any leaks. It is now time for our third stage, the warning light and buzzer test. I'm going to continuously pump down on my brake until both my warning light and my buzzer come on, which should occur at or before 55 psi. Now at this point I continuously pump down on my brake and I watch my air gauge. I can see that my warning light and buzzer came on at exactly 60 psi. Now that fourth and final test is going to be my valve deployment test. I'm going to continuously pump down my brake until both my tractor and trailer valves both deploy, which should occur between 45 and 20 psi. Now at this point I continue to pump down and I'm watching my valves. I need to see when they both deploy and note the air pressure. I can see both my tractor and trailer valves deployed at 30 psi. That fulfills the requirements for my air brake test. So guys, there it is, your perfect air brake test. If you do it just like this, you'll pass on your very first try. So there we have an example of an air brake test out in the field. Now I know this might seem like a lot of information, but it really is quite simple. You have 4 different tests. Your first test is to make sure that you can build air and that you don't overpressurize your tanks. Your second test is to make sure that you don't have any pinhole leaks in the lines of the tanks. Your third test is to make sure that the truck will warn you if you start to lose air. And your fourth test is to make sure that we do not drive with a depleted air source, that the truck will set our brakes safely until we can get that problem solved so we can get back out on the road. That's our air brake test. Now a little bit about our methodology here. If you notice, we are explaining what we're doing multiple times. We first tell the examiner what we're going to do, and then after we do it, we explain what we just did. And you notice that when we described what we just did, we gave specific moments that those things happened, right? That we said the warning light and buzzer came on at this specific PSI, that the valves deployed at this specific PSI, and that the governor cut off at this specific PSI. Now we need to do that to confirm when it happened, that it is in the threshold, and let the examiner know that we are watching that gauge to verify that this truck is compliant with the standards of an air brake test. So make sure you give a specific PSI when you denote when it actually occurred. All right, guys, there we have it. That is your 4-stage modernized air brake test, governor cutoff, applied pressure, warning light and buzzer, and our valve deployment test. Now, if you're interested in your entire pre-trip, please check this video right here, and that is going to be that new modernized full critical 30 style. And if you are interested in the study guide, reach out in the comment section below and let me know, and I'll make sure and get that right over to you. Other than that, guys, all the same stuff as usual. Like, comment, subscribe, and share to anybody you think would find this content helpful. As always, drive safe, drive smart. Until next time, guys.
Oh, hey there! This right here is the air horn.
They're all good. They're all winners. So that way you don't go rolling down the hill, right? We gotta make sure. I don't know. Does that work? All right.